Well, welcome. It's so good to see everyone this evening. We're just tickled that you're here at the East Tennessee History Center for this wonderful lecture. It's one of those special evenings that it's kind of late summer, early fall, just perfect weather. So it's a great night to be downtown in Knoxville. But we also welcome all of you that are with us as well via Zoom. And then for those that are interested, we're filming thanks to Knoxville Community Media, and it will be available on our YouTube page. So if you want to share that with friends and let them know at a later date that they can watch, we'll try to get that notice up. And you can always go to the ETHS, East Tennessee Historical Society's YouTube channel, and see past programs. So this is something we enjoy doing, and we're honored to have the guests that we have to present for us. So just as way of introducing some more things going on, I want to do that before I make further introductions. We have here at the History Center lectures. So our next lecture is actually this Wednesday, and it will be updating everyone on what's going on with the Western Heights Project here in Knoxville. That's a historic community housing project here in Knoxville, has a long history, and the city of Knoxville and partners are relooking and redeveloping that area with community input. And so they're going to be here presenting, because what we're beginning to see is, we're making history as we're preserving history and looking at the past. So we're trying to make people aware of things that are going on in the community that impact the history going forward. And so it will be at noon, be our brown bag here at the History Center, and it will also be available online. You can go online and register on the Historical Society's lectures and get the Zoom link from that if you would like to join us by Zoom. And then the History Center is also offering genealogy and family history programming again, and that's exciting. And on Thursday, September the 28th, also at noon, we will have Joanne Dickinson will be here, and she'll be presenting on the families of the Fork, early Knox County surnames. And so if you're interested in that, and the best place to find out what we have that coming up is on our website, easttnhistory.org, and we'll be glad to share that, and also liking us on Facebook, and we're also Facebook Live tonight. So a lot of people say, well, we're kind of surprised that a lot of this is keeping going, but what we found, the one thing that's kind of survived the epidemic and the shutdowns, this whole ability to be accessible for folks that can't be present, but they can still attend our programs. It's something that we're really tickled to be able to do. The other thing we have coming up, I will just mention that our feature gallery is currently closed because we're installing a new exhibit, and it will be opening on October the 6th. And the first Friday event, the evening will be a celebration and an opening of that exhibit. So we'll have incredible musicians here, and it'll be open free to the public. So we hope that you will come, if not then, for the run of the show. It will be October 6th through July the 28th of next year. And the title of the show is They Sang What They Lived, the story of Carl and Pearl Butler. And so we're looking forward to opening that show. And everybody loves football, I think. Maybe not so much today. We've got to build back up and some excitement. So hopefully by October the 18th, am I right on the date on that? Is that right, Ken? 18th, 13th. We have started Football Fridays, a couple of Fridays during the football season. We're closing down Market Street right behind the building and having a big festival kind of back there, having food and music, and having speakers, history speakers oriented to our Football Fridays tailgate for that Friday. So, and again, that runs from about 5 till 7. So come down and enjoy. We're trying to do some different things and being a part of this downtown Knoxville community as well. So again, best way to find out what's going on is to like us on Facebook, to find us on the internet, on our website. But the best way to support what we're doing is through membership. And if you're interested in learning more about membership, we have membership brochures, or talk to any one of us. Adam Alfrey's here, Ken Mays at the back, myself. I'm Lisa Oakley, Vice President and Curator of Education here for the Historical Society. So I think that's it for me, just to welcome you all again. And I would like to welcome Adam Velk, who is the director of the Green McAdoo Community Center and Museum, Community and Cultural Center in Clinton, which is central to this story. And I'll let you take it from there, introduce yourself, the museum, and then our speaker for tonight. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Standing ovation. Nice. Thank you. Yeah, I'm so excited to be here, so honored to be here. I know it's a little gauche to hype up your own museum at a different museum, but my name is Adam Velk. I'm at the Green McAdoo Cultural Center up in Clinton, Tennessee. Our whole museum is devoted to telling the story of the Clinton 12, which also is the subject of the book that Rachel Louise Martin here has written. And that museum in and of itself has been done in part due to the work that Rachel Louise Martin did years ago as a young historian. Rachel came all the way down to Clinton from during, I think it was college?
Yeah, immediately after my master's.
After her master's, she came down and conducted oral interviews of people in Clinton to get the scoop on what happened, how people saw this idea of the Clinton 12, the Clinton desegregation crisis of 1956. And that work still is housed at the Green McAdoo Cultural Center today and helps lead us in our interpretation of the story. As you will find out as you read through this book, that interpretation, those oral histories, provide a very interesting tapestry as to what happened. This book, the central, at its heart, is about memory and how a town remembers this traumatic event. And as you'll see, and as I'm sure Miss Martin will be able to, or Dr. Martin will be able to extrapolate on, it's tough for small rural towns to come to grips with some of the difficulties of their histories. Remembering that history is a challenge in and of itself. Now, Dr. Martin has done a lot of fabulous work with this book, spending over a decade working on this. It's a fantastic book, really coming to terms with the grittiness and the truth that has sometimes evaded the story of the Clinton 12. On top of that, she's also written a wonderful book called Hot Chicken, which is about the history of hot chicken in Nashville. I am so pleased and honored to be able to introduce her. If everyone wants to give a big round of applause for Dr. Martin.
All right. Well, first, thank you for that very generous introduction just now. I appreciate it. Thank you also to Lisa and the rest of the team here for inviting me to come and speak. It honestly has been a minute since I was at the East Tennessee Historical Society. When you work on a book for 18 years, it's amazing how many people you can meet and how many places you can go, and then say, you probably don't remember me after the fact. But this was a really vital part of my research process when I was working on this project in its earlier stages. And thank you also to those of you who are with us in person or online today. I am grateful that you decided to take out some time on your Monday afternoon on a beautiful late summer day to talk a little bit about history and memory and the choices we've made in our past. Adam, you gave me a very good way of just getting into what I want to talk about tonight, because I've been thinking a lot while I've been on book tour about the necessity and the power of small places and ordinary people to change the world. So often when we start talking about world-changing events, when we trace the arc of American history, we talk about what happens in Washington, D.C., Los Angeles, California, New York City. We might include Chicago, right? We very seldom focus on a place like Clinton or like Anderson County. And we also tend to talk about people who have incredible charisma and giant platforms. We write book after book after book about what Martin Luther King Jr. did, and he was an amazing man and an incredible orator. We need to have those people who are casting big dreams for us. I remember in graduate school, I think it was the Seattle Public Library, stacked up every book they had about Abe Lincoln. And it was a tower that reached from the floor of their atrium almost to their multi-story skylight above their heads. Those are the sorts of folks who tend to get our attention. But what I have learned over the course of this project and other work I've done is that while those might be the vital folks who give us the big picture or who tell us what's happening in the world around us, they are not actually the people who create change. Change is about normal people in tiny places waking up one day and saying, enough. Tomorrow, something else is going to begin happening. And it's also not about them waking up one day and saying, tomorrow change occurs. It's about them saying, I will commit the rest of my life to improving the world around me. And I will focus on my little corner of the world. My example for this in Clinton is an amazing woman named Winona McSwain. Winona McSwain should not have been able to change the world if you look at her on paper. She was barely able to finish the 8th grade before she had to drop out of school. There were 2 reasons for that. Number 1, there was no more school for her to go to at that point in her life. And number 2, her family needed her income. She had to go to work. So she did. But she didn't stop learning. She didn't stop dreaming. She kept working, but she also kept reading and staying in touch with the world. Eventually, she married. I say eventually, she married quite young. She moved to Anderson County, up to Clinton, and she began having babies. 12 of her babies made it to adulthood. She lost several other children along the way because of the lack of medical care and attention that was available to a poor Black family in Appalachia in the 1930s, 1940s, 1950s. Several of her children died of preventable diseases, things that could have been cured in that era. Things, in one case, that could have been prevented by widely available vaccines that white kids down the road were getting at school, and her children did not. And she decided that her kids would not have the life she had had. When she first started this out, she was very, very creative about it. So before 1939, no Black student in Anderson County had had access to a secondary education. The school system for them stopped in 8th grade. The county was able to do that because you had to, according to the state constitution, if you had 75 students of a certain race in the county, you had to provide them with a high school. So most counties that had less than 75 Black students in them interpreted that as being they did not have to, or maybe it wasn't even legal for them to use state funds to provide for a high school education for Black students. And so before 1939, school ended for most Black children in the 8th grade, unless their parents were able to pay for them to go to a private school somewhere, a boarding school out of county, where they could receive further education. In 1939, some Black parents and adults in Anderson County decided that was it. They were done with that. Their kids needed to have access to the same sort of education that the rest of the white students in Clinton did, because the world was changing. People were no longer going to be farmers. They needed to be able to read and write. They needed high school diplomas to move up in the world. And so they went around the county and they gathered up signatures. And they presented this petition to the county school board and basically forced the school board to say, okay, fine, we will pay tuition. Tuition, not transportation, but we will pay tuition so that your students can attend La Follette High School, which was a failing school, one county north of them, but nevertheless better than no education at all. For Winona McSwain, that didn't cut it. So she went to the superintendent and she said, I want the money that you would have given for my child to attend La Follette, cut a check. And I'm going to choose where that money goes. For her girls, that meant that the money went to a private Black girls' school in Asheville, North Carolina, where they were able to receive a phenomenal education. For her boys, they were sent to Nashville to attend Pearl Cone High School. Well, today it's Pearl Cone. At the time, it was just Pearl High School, one of the top Black schools in the nation. And that worked for a decade, until in 1949, one of the principals at Pearl goes and gets Winona McSwain's son out of classroom and says, you can't keep attending classes here. We don't have your tuition money. So he calls his mama and he says, Mom, the money's not there. So she goes to the superintendent and says, basically, what the what? And he says, we're not doing that anymore. Your student can attend the same failing school that all of the other Black kids attend. No more special treatment, just for the McSwains. And that is why the following semester, in August of 1950, 5 Black students walk in to Clinton High School and ask to register for classes. 2 of them are directly related to Winona McSwain. They, along with them, have that older brother who had been pulled out of class the preceding fall because the tuition had not been paid. Winona McSwain's younger daughter, Alva J., ends up being one of the 12 who desegregates Clinton High School. And it's people like Winona and her family who actually affect the change we need to see in America. They are the people who go out and say, this doesn't work for me. The system is bigger than me, but there's room to play within it. There's room to be creative within it. There are ways for me to attempt to find what I need, and when that doesn't work, I can head down to the Knoxville NAACP, which, by the way, did not want to touch the Clinton desegregation case. Had absolutely no desire to take on the Clinton desegregation case until Winona McSwain basically guilt-tripped them into it. And as a result of her tenacity and her determination and her creativity, Clinton High School in 1956 proved that desegregation could happen in the American South, and it could happen immediately. It did not have to take us, we're more segregated today than we were in 1968. It did not have to take us 60 plus years to create equality in education. We could have done it as soon as Winona McSwain asked for it. And so I've just, over the course of the conversations I've been having and for the research I've been doing and thinking and living with these these people, these characters, my narrators. It's become incredibly evident to me that as all of us watch the nation around us devolving into deeper partisanship, as we watch inequality growing in new ways, or in some cases, the return of things that we would have assumed died a long time ago. First of all, that even those of us who say we dwell on separate sides of the aisle share a common humanity, and somewhere within us have some common empathy for the people around us. That it's one thing to look at things and say policies, platforms, politics. It's another thing to say children, education, like in the effect of this upon individual humans. And returning to that emphasis on who is my neighbor and how can I help? And how can we begin to improve our cities and our communities, our schools, our world, right where we are for the people around us? It's the only way that we can work ourselves out of the quagmire that we are moving ourselves into right now. So yeah, the power of tiny places, the power of normal people. It's necessary until we each start to, I guess in essence, garden the corner where we live. Just like we're each responsible for cutting our own grass, we are responsible for taking care of our neighbors. So that ended up going a few places I wasn't necessarily expecting us to go today. I am prepared for the conversations that might come as a result of where I just went. But the other thing that I have been reflecting on a lot, something that I always think about, is this power of memory. How we remember and how we also choose to forget. Who gets to speak in history and who gets left out. And if you buy my book, if you read my book, you're going to realize that in some ways, it might remind you a little bit of reading a Russian novel, because there are going to be so many characters and so many names, and you're going to get to meet so many people. And hopefully you can keep them all straight. And you know what? If you forget one or two, it's really okay. It's all right. It happens to me too. But I want to read a little bit from the introduction of the book, just around this concept of memory, because eventually for me, this concept of memory, as well as the power of tiny places, is going to all tie together. It's not there quite yet, but maybe it'll happen in the next 15 minutes. Deciding what narrative, or more accurately, whose narrative to feature in the exhibits at Green McAdoo was going to be challenging. The battle of the story over Clinton's desegregation is part of an ongoing national struggle over the politics of memory. History, like all things involving power in America today, is seen as a zero-sum game. But our memories are not time machines. They reveal something deeper and truer and more personal than a simple timeline of events. We choose what we want to remember, and we also choose what we will forget. I was able to reconstruct these previously unknown stories because the people of Clinton were generous with their memories. My narrators taught me to think of memory as being like music. The basic building blocks are the solos, one voice telling its story. As soon as more voices join in, the music of the past becomes more complex. Some people have held on to perspectives that harmonize, differing only by gradations of nuance, but more often the various voices are in discord and disagreement. This is the most troubling part of memory, but it can also be the most revealing. There is power in the complexity of a community's story when it clashes like Stravinsky's Rite of Spring. If you stand next to only one voice, the rest of the orchestra seems to be in chaos. But if you can step back and listen to the whole of the group, the differing narratives become the melodies, harmonies, and descants of the piece. As I've learned about the struggle in Clinton, I've been amazed by its erasure from official accounts of the civil rights movement. Midway through this project, I climbed to the 4th floor of the Davis Graduate Library at the University of North Carolina. I studied the call numbers, searching for E185.61.A425-2002. I'm sure that means a lot to all of you right now. The beginning of the library's main civil rights history section, I reached for the first book, The Origins of the African American Civil Rights Movement, 1865 to 1956, and flipped to the index looking for any reference to Clinton. Nothing. I checked the next likely book, The American Civil Rights Movement, Readings and Interpretations. Still no references to Clinton. I continued down the shelf. What happened in this little town between 1956 and 1958 wasn't a small story at the time. People around the world followed as 12 black students braved mobs and beatings and bombings for the right to attend high school in their home county. The Associated Press, Reuters, Life, Time, the New York Times, America's 3 major television networks, even the BBC and the London Daily Sketch all stationed journalists there. Pioneering documentarian Edward R. Murrow filmed 2 award-winning specials about the school. Evangelist Billy Graham hosted a crusade in the school's gymnasium, urging repentance, healing, and reconciliation. The events in Clinton challenge how we talk about our civil rights history. Many of the best-known desegregation narratives, Little Rock, New Orleans, Boston, Birmingham, have been told in ways that give us clear-cut heroes and villains. What happened in Clinton is messier than that. It is a tale of how apathy enables hatefulness. It's a story of how discord can balloon into violence. It's an account of how doing the wrong thing gave some people unprecedented power and opportunity. It's a record of how doing the right thing can leave some individuals permanently scarred physically and mentally. It's a chronicle of how a small southern town can explode and then a whole entire country can forget. On the first day of the 1956-57 school year, however, none of the participants knew any of this was about to happen. They were doing something never before accomplished in American history. Had their success been decisive and immediate, or had local, state, and federal officials shut down dissent and stood up for the court order, calling integration right and fair, where would we be as a nation today? Instead, everyone in power waffled or looked away. Today, we are split by many of the same divisions and grievances that splintered Clinton in 1956. How will our leaders respond? And if they, too, continue to abdicate their responsibility, how will we take charge? The process of forgetting an event as important as the desegregation of Clinton High School sounds passive, but it requires an active correction of the record. When I started my work in Clinton back in 2005, my first oral history interview was with Margaret Anderson, a white woman who had been the high school's business and typing teacher. She had served as the unofficial guidance counselor for the 12 black students. Though she had not believed in desegregation when the 1956 school year began, she did believe in obeying the law. The black students' struggle to remain in Clinton High changed her into a true integrationist. She wrote about desegregation in a series of articles for the New York Times, which she later expanded into a memoir, The Children of the South. In her narrative, she centered the black students and castigated many white leaders. Maybe that was why, when I was introduced to her by a local white official just old enough to have seen events for himself, he admonished her. "Now remember, Miss Anderson, you lied in your book," he said. "You tell Rachel what we agreed had occurred." Yeah. After he left, Margaret made me a mug of instant coffee and we sat down in her parlor to chat. She was nervous. Understandably so. "When I don't want you to record it, could I just raise my hand or something, give you a signal? That way I feel free, you know what I mean?" I didn't realize it that morning in Margaret Anderson's kitchen, But I would spend the next 18 years of my life immersed in the stories the people of Clinton had to share, whether their neighbors wanted them to or not. As each person I spoke with would show me, William Faulkner was right. History wasn't dead. It was barely the past. And I don't just mean that stories told by grandparents and great-grandparents lived on in their descendants' minds. This history was so recent that many of the participants themselves were still alive. When locals looked at pictures of white riders around the school, they knew the faces captured on film. These were the people they shopped with at the local food city, or worshiped with at First Baptist Church, or traded presents with every Christmas. The people in the pictures had birthed and raised them. The best way to settle the conflict over desegregation was to let it lie, many white folks said. Or, as one founder of the Tennessee White Youth told me when I asked him for an interview, "Honey, there was a lot of ugliness down there at that school that year. Best we just move on and forget it." But though the rest of the world did forget about Clinton High School, the students and teachers and parents and townspeople affected by the story could not. Their experiences had changed them, scarred them, broken them. Some were able to rebuild their lives, but others were not. Two of the people I'd come to admire, complicated individuals with the hamartias necessary for classical heroes, never recovered. Both would die by suicide. The first lesson of this book is this: history is the story of human beings, individuals responding to events already in motion and seldom under their control. Along the line, many of them end up doing things they never expected. Sometimes they act bravely, changing their world for good. At other times, they do injury to people they would have called friends. Very few of us are simply heroes or villains. None of us deserves to be remembered for only the very best or the very worst things we have done, and yet we must be accountable for our damage. And a lot of damage was caused in those years. So, I feel like that final sentence almost connected some of my ideas that I have presented here tonight. I would love to have some further conversation if y'all have any questions. Otherwise, I will just keep going. But I'd love to open it up if there are some thoughts or some questions so far.
I was surprised by the two people who did commit suicide. The leaders. So heavy, the burden.
Mm-hmm.
And if you could just repeat the question.
Absolutely. Yes, so she was saying that she was, and I'm sorry, I have forgotten your name.
Jan.
Thank you, Jan. I think I've seen you before. But Jan was saying that she was surprised by the two individuals who did end up committing suicide. It's been 43 years since they killed themselves, so I don't suppose that this is much of a spoiler at this point, though I've had some people treat it kind of like it is. But the two people who end up taking their own lives are Principal D.J. Britton Jr., who was principal of the school that year, and then the Reverend Paul Turner, who was the pastor of First Baptist Church in Clinton. When I say the largest church in town, I mean exponentially. I mean that they have close to 1,000 members, and the next largest church is probably around 150. And so two very powerful men. Both of them went into the school year standing on what would end up being called the law and order side of things, which meant they did not agree with the Supreme Court's ruling. There was no white person in Clinton who publicly said they did agree with desegregation at the beginning of the year. But they did say, we will obey the law. So we're not going to go to the streets. We're not going to riot against this. We're not going to fight this. And both men ended up going much further than that. DJ Britton goes further than that, basically from day one. He says, I don't agree with this, but every student in my charge is going to receive an equal education. Now, he did not let them play on any sports teams. He did not let them attend any pep rallies or go to any dances or join the theater. Like, nothing like that was open to them. But they were given access. The students who tested into the college track took college track classes. They were not tracked into the vocational track or given a lesser experience academically at Clinton High from day one. And he also said, any student in my charge will be safe to the best of my ability. Now, as you read the book, you will see the best of his ability only goes so far. There was an incredible amount of violence and even more threatened violence on campus. But DJ Britton did his best to protect those kids. And then Paul Turner, when the violence gets really bad at one point in the end of the fall semester, the black students start boycotting the school. And their idea is that by boycotting the school, they're not quitting the school. Instead, they are putting the school in contempt of court, trying to force federal authorities to step in and provide protection on campus because of how bad the violence has gotten. That really threatened to backfire because there was a fine line between boycotting and quitting if you were not one of the 12 black students. All of the white authorities said, yeah, this might work out for us. This might really end up working out. And so Paul Turner calls them up and says, I will escort you to school. I'll take you through the middle of the mob outside. You will have literally the protection of my body. And he does that along with two other white leaders in town. Those other two guys are allowed to leave unmolested, but Paul Turner was chased through town and beaten up pretty badly. The next Sunday, he gets into the pulpit and publicly says there is no color line at the cross. He then goes on to kind of mitigate that statement. He definitely had not become a full-fledged integrationist at that point, but nevertheless, he has taken more of a stand than anyone else, any other white person had. And so he was targeted for the rest of the time he was in Clinton for the coming several years. And both of those men, though they did not take their lives until they were near retirement, until 1980 in Turner's case, and oh gosh, I want to say 88 for DJ Britton. Yes? Okay. Yeah. 88 for DJ Britton. Both of their families say they never recovered from Clinton. Both of them go on to achieve quite a lot. Both of them earn doctoral degrees. Both of them continue to be leaders, one within his denomination, one within another school system. Both of them, you would look at their lives and say what happened in Clinton was kind of a launching pad for them to move out and move on. But for them as humans, it took them apart. They never pieced it back together. And that's one of those understudied aspects of the civil rights movement so far, is the cost. The black students also bore an incredible cost as a result of the violence that happened. They talk very openly about having PTSD and not even knowing it until much, much later, until after Afghanistan, when we started talking about what veterans come home and face and how they're responding to the world. And then these people who 50 years ago had faced down bombs and threatened lynchings and knives and everything else said, oh, that's me. So yeah, absolutely. Yes, sir.
Mr. Horace Wells, I believe, on the Encourage.
Yes.
Took a leading role, but it never seemed to. He never seemed to suffer any problems of that I knew of.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
if anybody was highly critical of him or took it out on him in any way.
So we have a question about Horace Wells, who was the publisher for the Clinton Courier-News in '56, and whether he faced any of the same sorts of violence. He faced a lot of public censure at the time. There was a rival newspaper that was started in the county. Oh, shoot. This is frustrating. Give me a second, because now it's going to bug me. The Tennessee Reporter, that's what it was. That should have been so easy to come up with. Anyway, there was a rival newspaper that was started, and their entire purpose that they claimed was because Horace Wells was misrepresenting the truth, lying to the public, and continuing this federal push, this communist-inspired federal push for desegregation. And within that paper, he faces a great deal of libel and slander. And they, in addition to saying, oh, he's printing lies and he's not telling you the full story, they also accuse him of not secretly being Jewish. They also say DJ Britton Jr. was secretly, and of course that at the time was one of the worst things they could have said about someone. The anti-Semitism is a critical undercurrent of this entire experience. So he faced that sort of thing. There was one time when there are lots of bombings that happen. The subtitle of this is The Explosive Beginning of School Desegregation, and it's not figurative. Things blow up all the time. And so I learned that there was a very real difference in the type of bomb that is set. If it's just blasting powder, or it's not carefully placed to do real damage, it's kind of like a warning shot. It's like they took a pistol and fired it in the air. They didn't mean anything. They meant something by it, but they didn't mean anything by it. If it's dynamite and they've put it under the foundation of your house, they meant something by it. So at one point, someone tosses a can of blasting powder toward Horace Wells's house. It doesn't get to his house. They don't have a good enough arm for it. They toss it from a moving vehicle. So it lands in his neighbor's front yard, and it causes, it blows some dirt up. But that's about it. And so it's understood that that was intended for Horace Wells, but no, compared to some of the other white leaders in town, he got off pretty easy. They didn't burn any crosses in his yard. They say some things about his daughters who were still high school age, but they never actually threatened them in any real way. And what they had to say about the girls is so just patently false that no one even, it doesn't do them any social damage.
Well, the alternative paper evidently didn't last very long, and of course his paper continued to.
Oh yeah, it's still around today.
Continued to thrive.
Yeah, no, Leo Ellie, the editor of it, I think he published it to 58, off and on, and then moved on. He wasn't a journalist. He was mad.
Online, we have a question from Keith Royston. He said he just picked up your book on Saturday from Green McAdoo and wanted to know if during the process, if you found any unknown facts or comments or discoveries late in the writing of your book that caused you to make substantial changes to the book.
Oh, like in year 18, did I discover things? Actually, yeah, I did. Actually, Winona McSwain joined the narrative of the book after the first draft had been submitted. So that was exciting. Thankfully, my editor was very excited about that change and did not say, why do we have a whole new chapter here about someone I haven't heard of yet? Because, yeah, there was potential for that to be the response. And how did I come across her story that late in the game? I had definitely been looking, looked her up multiple times and never found anything substantive. Yes, I know. There's a black paper out of Philadelphia that digitized their archives in the meantime. And one of their journalists had spent quite a bit of time on the Hill in Clinton doing interviews, and he loved Winona McSwain. I think he just hung out at her house. I think that he came to town, he sat down on her front porch and said, this is a great view of downtown, I'm never leaving, is my working theory on what happened there, because he wrote 5 or 6 different articles about the McSwains or featuring the McSwains or everybody else coming to the McSwains. And so thanks to him, I was able to say, oh, this is the role she played in 56, and then it was very easy to go backwards from there and reconstruct the rest of the story. But I hadn't been able to establish what she had done in 56 until those got digitized. So yeah, that one, if the book was supposed to, originally, it was supposed to come out, maybe 6 months before it ended up getting published, and then things got shuffled behind the scenes, and if that hadn't happened, we would not have Winona.
Did you get any threats
Oh, yeah.
recently? I mean, after publication?
No, amazingly. Well, not related to this project, at least.
Okay.
I've had threats since then, but not related to this one. But yeah, there was a time, I guess like 2014. I'm not even totally positive who I made mad, but I made somebody mad, and it's the only time that I've like physically felt alarmed. My Twitter DMs are always a landmine. Social media is a terrible place. So if you DM me, I may or may not ever respond to it because I don't know what I'm going to find in there. But yeah, I think it was about 2014. Someone found me, and it was not good for a little while there.
How did you deal with that? Or did you send it to authorities, or did you deal with it on your own?
So there were 3 incidents. The first one was someone left a knife in the doorsill of my house. The second one, I might get the second and third one confused. At one point, I started driving and the wheels fell off my car. Did not know that could happen. And then the third one, someone slashed my tires. And I don't remember it. I know the first one was the knife, and I don't remember the car incident. And the slashed tires happened where I was waitressing at the time to earn some extra money. So it was like 3 a.m. in a different like not even where I lived. So I knew that they knew where I lived and where I worked as well.
But away from East Tennessee?
Yes, this was in Nashville.
Okay.
My dad was the one who found the knife, so I know we reported that one. I don't know that I reported the other 2. I also stopped walking to my car by myself, and I learned to check my hubcaps. And I also periodically have to tell people, like, I know that what I just said or did does not seem totally logical to you. I just sounded really paranoid in this moment in time because of something completely innocent that just happened. we need to back up. I have history.
Just somebody online just asked if you could just kind of repeat the questions that are being asked.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, so someone had asked if I had ever faced threats, either as a result of publication or as a result of this project. That's what we were discussing.
Perhaps a little bit, we've talked about some of the characters and some of the individuals from the white community.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a little bit observations about some of the students. And because I know that different students, different participants have kind of handled things or communicated in different ways or lived with the story in a different way.
Yes, so the question, what you may have been able to hear, Lisa, but just in case, the question was how the Black students handled the outcome of, or the aftermath of desegregation. Since we had talked a little bit about how some of the white leaders had handled it, and then I had very tantalizingly hinted that it also had an effect on them. One of the fundamental ways that they handled it was, in many cases, when they left Clinton High, they stopped talking about what had happened there. And you'll see this pop up periodically as some of their descendants begin to learn what had occurred. I know Anna Teresa Caswell at one point says she was one of the 12 Black students, and she was actually, she faced extra threat that year because she was on crutches. She had a disformity of her leg that necessitated multiple surgeries during the 1956-57 school year. So not only is she facing all the violence everybody else is facing, but she's doing it while requiring assistance walking, which I can't even imagine facing down a mob while you're on crutches. That's just terrifying. And so I think it was one of her nephews found a news report about her in 2004, 2005, somewhere in there, and called her up and said, what in the world is this? Like, are they lying about you? How do I not know any of this about you? And it was the first time she had really talked about what she had done and the groundbreaking movement she'd been part of. Bobby Kane, who was the first Black student to graduate from Clinton High, did not discuss what happened with his wife, with his kids, with anyone. Now, his children apparently did know what had occurred because his wife had watched him on television and had seen the news reports about him. And so she had some awareness and had told the children about it. But the first time, according to him, that he and the family ever discussed it was when his grandson was in elementary school. And it came time for a Black History Day performance. And his grandson said, I really need you to be there. I really need you to be there. I really need you to be there. So he came, as, you know, good granddads do. And his grandson came out dressed as him from the Life magazine photographs. And it was the first time they as a family had ever said, this is what happened. And according to what he has said since then, when he started trying to revisit those memories, he had blocked so many of them that he couldn't even really say what had occurred that year. And one of his sisters had made a scrapbook and gave him the scrapbook. And he started working through just that trauma. And the second or third week of school, there's a journalist who interviews him for, I think it's for Collier's magazine, and says, this child is exhibiting the symptoms of someone who has been at war and has seen too much. When you ask him questions, he starts sweating, his words trail off. There are things he cannot even tell you about what has happened in the last 2 weeks. And that was the beginning of the school year. He had another 9 months to go. So yeah, and even people whose families got them out. Joanne Allen Boyce was another one of the 12 Black students. In addition to her becoming one of kind of the spokespeople for the cadre of students who were desegregating the high school, her dad repeatedly takes very public stands that put him at risk. And so by December of 56, her mother says, we're done. Like, you two seem to be trying to die. And I'm not good with that. And so they pack up and leave town basically overnight. They move out to Los Angeles. Joanne is enrolled in a new school. It is an integrated school. The school has been integrated forever. Like, this is not a thing for them. It just is the reality of life in LA. And she said that it took her months before she realized, even that people were smiling at her in the hall, that she was safe. Even longer to learn how to interact with students and teachers in a normal school setting, just because of what had occurred during those 3 or 4 months in Clinton. So, yes.
I have to say that one of the most shocking things about reading your book was finding out about the author of Education of Little Tree. It broke my heart.
Yeah.
And that's just a little thing on the side for me, regardless of the desegregation and all the problems in the area. But I had no idea.
Yeah.
So ignorant of that fact.
Well, he hit it very well. So what she's mentioning is that, I forget what he even publishes under. So The Education of Little Tree, a book that generations of kids in America have been required to read. I want to think 5th grade, 6th grade, somewhere like that. It made it onto one of my very early required English reading lists. Summertime, when you're first learning how to do that and that you have to read things over the summer. I mean, I was reading over the summer. I'm that kid, right? But anyway, one of the first required reading lists. But he was actually Asa Carter, who was the leader of a very, very violent offshoot of the White Citizens Council. In fact, he gets kicked out of the Alabama White Citizens Council because he's too violent and too anti-Semitic and too racist. And it takes something to earn that title. He ends up being affiliated with the group of people who bomb multiple synagogues. He is at least loosely affiliated with the guy who we just had the anniversary of the bombing of the Baptist church where the 4 teenage girls were killed. He's at least loosely affiliated with that bombing as well. So he's all sorts of ugly and hateful. And I think that that's one of those places where initially you say, oh my God, how? And then honestly going back and reading the book and looking at all the ways that we have let this philosophy, this hatefulness, this prejudice seep into every aspect of our culture. And it means that it's really hard to go in then and unpick and unlearn, because some of it seems so innocuous. Some of it might even seem like it's actually fighting for the other side until you go back in and you say, what's going on here? It reminds me of, I was raised in the rural South. I wasn't raised here in East Tennessee. I grew up in Rutherford County, Tennessee, so, a few counties over. But I was raised Southern Baptist. I love me a good four-part Southern gospel quartet, right? Like those harmonies, especially the old style where the tenor, God knows what they're doing, but it's glorious. I love it. And at one point during the course of this project, I thought, I need something fun to work on. And so I decided I was going to research the history of Southern gospel quartets. And I was sure that there were going to be some dudes that I didn't want to know about, right? Like, we're talking about us, so we have some bad moments, but I thought, surely I can make this fun. And it took me about 2 hours of research before some librarian burst my pretty little bubble and said, yeah, so the founder of the guy who basically launched white Southern gospel quartets was a leader of the Klan, and he used these quartets to sing and publish Klan music to raise money for the Klan. And you go in, and yes, these quartets in the very beginning are out there singing cluck, cluck, cluck. And it's so interwoven. And it's going to take a whole lot of work and a whole lot of really hard questioning of ourselves and who we are and what we believe in and what we want to believe and what we want to teach our children and where we want to go in the future.
So I think we're kind of coming close to time. We have a good question that might be segue into final comments, and then folks are welcome to stay. We have books for sale out front. The question is, what are you currently working on? You told me that's a fascinating project you're thinking about.
Yes.
So that might be something. And then just any final thoughts to kind of tie things together. And hopefully, I mean, this has been a great book talk on the book, and most everybody has a copy. So, and you're going to be in Clinton tomorrow.
I'm in Clinton tomorrow. So if you need to see more of me, come north.
Yeah. But you might want to tell them a little bit about what you're doing and repeat that too for the.
Yes. So the question was about what I am currently working on. There's a tremendous amount of freedom and also backlog because I've been working on this for 18 years. So like, what do you do now? I am really fascinated by, and it's actually a group of women. So the woman who led me into this project at the time was called Ophelia Colley. Eventually she moved in 1940 to Nashville and changed her name to Sarah, and then she married Henry Cannon, so she became Sarah Cannon, and she went on the Grand Ole Opry where she performed the character Minnie Pearl. But I'm fascinated by Ophelia Colley. Back in the day, like before Minnie Pearl is Minnie Pearl, who was she? And she was this college-educated, very wealthy, highly cultured woman who, at 21, took about $10 that she had in her savings account, got on a train, and joined a traveling theater production company. So for the next almost decade, she went around the rural South. She would have 10 days in each location, and she would cast, produce, and direct a play. At the end of the 10 days, the play would go on. She would then pocket half the money for the production company. Half the money would stay in the local community to buy chairs for the school's auditorium or to put a new floor down in the gymnasium or whatever it was that they were raising money for. And then she would head off to the next location and do this all again. Fascinates me. I mean, just what in the world is going on there? This production company she was working for was run by a woman named Hetty Jane Dunaway, who had been one of the most notable vaudeville actresses of her time. And she wrote and composed the music and everything else for the plays that these 250 some odd producers were putting on across the South. And all of the plays were blackface. So it gives me a chance to really, I really want to dive into some of these questions of femininity and class and race and opportunity, who has opportunity, who doesn't, ambition within white middle-class womanhood. I don't know why I might have questions about that. Just all of these things I want to dive into deeper. And I think that this might be a good way to go about it. Or who knows? We'll see. There has been one essay, if you want to know more. Oxford American, this past summer, I published an essay about the woman who had inspired the character Minnie Pearl. She stayed, as Ophelia Colley stayed with this woman up in Baileyton, Alabama for 10 days. And that was the source of Minnie Pearl. But, and my final comments, how do I tie all of this together, y'all? It's very simple. Change doesn't happen because of other people. Change happens because of us. We are in yet another moment of crisis. 1956 was a moment of crisis. We are in another one right now, and we are the people who determine what happens next. It's not our federal leaders, it's not our state leaders, it's not even our mayor. It's us. We get to decide. And we get to decide whether we take care of each other and protect each other and open doors for each other, or whether we will perpetuate the violence and the damage that has been done in the past. And those are my final thoughts.
Thank you so much.